What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Listen, everybody is clamoring, looking for the next best player that you haven't heard of yet. So Alexander and I are going to give you 4 players that we think are probably just an injury away from being successful dynasty assets. With that being said, we're not hoping for any actual injuries. We're just looking into the future. Check this video out. All right, what's up, Alexander, and everybody who's tuning back into the channel. Guys, if you have liked the content that you have seen over the past couple weeks, make sure to hit the like button below. Of course, subscribe and comment below in this video. I tend to get back to everybody who responds. I've had some great responses, to be honest with you, over the last couple weeks. In fact, some really challenging responses to some of the shorts that we've posted and some of the longer form videos, which, as somebody who really loves debate, I always love a good challenge. It helps me learn. Sometimes you guys say things that I didn't even envision in the first place. So this week, though, we've got 4 players. Not so surprising. 3 of them are rookies. The 4th player, though, I think should be on more people's radar, as Alexander would agree as well. And he plays an entirely different position from the first 3. So let's jump right into this one. The first player is Zach Charbonnet of the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, I'm a homer. I love the player coming out of college. Should people consider him as a player that we should really be targeting who's just one injury away from unlocking vast upside?
Absolutely. I mean, he's got a fantastic profile. I mean, in most cases before the draft, before he was selected by the Seahawks and having to be under Kenneth Walker in that situation, he was going the 5th overall on first round draft picks for rookies. So he has 1,300 yards his last year. He's 91st percentile with 7.0 yards per carry. His yards after catch was 806 out of all of his total yardage. He had 37 receptions last year. He's got a fantastic receiving profile. And on top of that, his yards after contact per attempt was like almost 4.2. And that's up to par with the number 1 running back in this class, Bijan Robinson. And it's just the PFF grade, 93.6 rushing grade. He's just got a monster profile for a player that, I think he's just one of the premier, one injury away players that we will talk about on this list. And again, I think he's a huge value if Kenneth Walker goes down with the injury. And then we already seen some sort of, rumblings within the preseason with Kenneth Walker dealing with a groin injury.
It's really interesting because on Keep Trade Cut right now, he is the running back 19, running back 20. We'll talk about this here in a minute. Squeezed between Miles Sanders, who's 26 and a half years old. Squeezed between J.K. Dobbins, who's 24 and a half, but always in the tent on the sidelines. And so it's a really interesting situation because you brought it up. Prior to being selected by Seattle, he was a consensus top 5 pick, even with the quarterbacks in this class. Then he goes to Seattle, and obviously most dynasty gamers are now concerned and feel like they're hands off because they don't know when his opportunity is going to arise. I think even without injury, he's going to get touches immediately. And you and I have talked about this in the past. Pete Carroll has not mixed words. Like, he has come out and said they are concerned about injuries. They know that Charbonnet brings a different type of football to the field. They said that they would have drafted him even earlier than where they selected him in the 2nd round. And guys, don't forget, Rashad Penny, Chris Carson, Alex Collins, Travis Homer, DJ Dallas, CJ Prosise, all injured in the Pete Carroll era. Kenneth Walker already dealing with a groin. Zach Charbonnet was dealing with an injury that sounded like it was a severe one. Then he comes back just like 3 days later, and he's back in the fold. But what's really interesting to me is, you look, and his best comparable player on Player Profiler is DeMarco Murray. And correct me if I'm wrong, but once upon a time, DeMarco Murray was an asset that you wanted to get your hands on in the worst way. Caught 50 balls 3 different times in 7 seasons, rushed for over 1,800 yards. But what's really funny is when you see Charbonnet coming out of college, again, ranked 14th in yards after contact, 5th in carries of 15 yards or greater, and 29th in yards per route run at 1.3. So these are all things. He may not be as fast as Kenneth Walker, but he is an infinitely better pass catcher. And that's problem number 1, because that probably puts him in 3rd down opportunity right off the bat. And then what happens in the red zone?
I mean, he's got the size to be the red zone guy, and there's metrics that state, Kenneth Walker on short distances has not been really efficient.
Here's the other factor. One injury away means that he has access to the league's third highest red zone usage workload, a snap share that was over 70% in 8 of Walker's last 11 games played. Only 4 players last year had an over 70% snap share: Barkley, Jacobs, Christian McCaffrey, and Dalvin Cook. So to think that Walker would have been in that classification had he played a whole year, and on top of that, a target share likely well in excess of the 6.3% one that Kenneth Walker saw. So you should be afraid in general, even though Kenneth Walker is the inverse. Walker's still what? He's the RB9, RB8 on Keep Trade Cut. There is a significant difference between these two players and their value. But again, going back to the question on Keep Trade Cut, he's sitting at RB19, RB20. Is there any chance that you would prefer Miles Sanders or J.K. Dobbins to him of the 2 players that I named?
I mean, Miles Sanders is going into an unknown situation. J.K. Dobbins just can't get on the field, and it makes me really nervous with his knee injuries and how he re-aggravated the injury. And even starting out the 2023 preseason on the PUP, I definitely would kind of lean to Zach Charbonnet, where I kind of lean that there could potentially be a situation where this is like a Nick Chubb versus Kareem Hunt, and with potentially Charbonnet being the Kareem Hunt, and that's one of the highest value backup running backs in fantasy.
There's absolute flex appeal here. And I know Seattle sort of flipped the script last year. I believe they had a 57% pass ratio to the opposite, where in the past they've been closer to 50-50 or the inverse in some seasons with Russell Wilson. I think this is a team that's looking for more balance, and I think that's a big reason why Charbonnet was added, in addition to the fact that they never have a healthy running back when they hit the playoffs. So this was a page turn by Pete Carroll. It's not an indictment on Kenneth Walker, but it's certainly a warning to Kenneth Walker owners that there is another talented running back in this backfield. So with that being said, there's a backfield that looks eerily similar to this, and that is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Tank Bigsby, who was recently drafted to this roster after Travis Etienne was, again, the prince who was promised, yet the target share hasn't necessarily manifested itself. Why is Tank Bigsby just 1 injury away?
Because he's a big back with a great rushing grade, and he had 30 receptions in 2022 on really what's a subpar Auburn team. It's not a very good offensive line, and he had 5.5 yards per carry, which isn't fantastic, but of those 5.5 yards per carry, almost 4.2 came after contact. So he was creating yards. It's kind of similar to Cam Akers coming out FSU. The offense was really not too great. He was the offensive line was poor, and he was having to create a lot of yards afterwards as well. And we all coveted that kind of profile. Problem being, Tank Bigsby's having to be behind Travis Etienne, but given a full workload, this guy would be producing in a fantastic offense.
People really shouldn't forget this. So you have a really high-end backup behind Travis Etienne, and the coaching staff has certainly made mention of this, the recognition of his hands, his elusiveness, his size. And then you look at him coming out of college last year, he's one of the best 3-down skill set backs in the class. I mean, he's right near the top. 15.3% college target share was 94th percentile, of course. RB21 in forced missed tackles was 61 in the SEC. RB32 in carries of greater than 15 yards. And this was all while playing with the 3rd lowest graded run blocking line in the SEC. So he's doing this above and beyond this offensive line that isn't helping him out. And to be quite honest with you, I'm not really sure exactly what he can't do that Etienne can. I think there's a lot more similarities in the capabilities of these profiles. I know Etienne's very explosive, but in the event of a Travis Etienne injury, Bigsby would find himself competing with Jermichael Hasty and Dearness Johnson. It's not like this is going to be some superior battle to gain opportunity in this backfield, but he would also step into a top 10 red zone workload immediately. Now, the one thing I do want to mention, this is the one glaring hole in the Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne profile, and I mentioned it at the top. It's the target share. Jacksonville has been in the bottom 5 in running back target rate over the last 2 seasons, both years under 16%. Travis Etienne last year, 2.6 targets per game. The RB29, those 2.6 targets per game were ranked next to Raheem Mostert and Latavius Murray.
Yeah, it's not a great receiving situation with Etienne being, that coveted three down back coming out, and his receiving profile was fantastic coming out in Clemson. Yeah, I'm not sure what they're doing with the offense there, but yeah, again, Tank Bigsby's profile as a three down back, especially when he can create yards when in porous offensive lines situations, I think he could be a fantastic if he has to fill in for Travis Etienne.
Oh, and things get better because we talked about Zach Charbonnet. You have to move 15 running back spots down the rankings on Keep Trade Cut to find Tank Bigsby. He's basically budget Charbonnet in a lot of ways. He's at the RB35 spot, and he's sitting right next to Antonio Gibson and Khalil Herbert. So between these guys, in my head, I see the debate that you're having. Like between the ears, I know the debate that you're having. You're saying not Khalil Herbert, but the question is Antonio Gibson with that profile and that upside and that potential versus Tank Bigsby, who's behind Etienne, who will be waiting. I'm interested in your answer. Of these two players, who is it?
So next to Gibson and Khalil Herbert, who would I prefer between the three? I mean, I would, if I had to rank them right now, I would go Antonio Gibson, Tank Bigsby, Khalil Herbert. I think Herbert's got way too many talented running backs to have to deal with on that offense. And then Gibson, I still believe in the athleticism and the situation. Brian Robinson is just not, to me, not a threat to Gibson. I think eventually the talent comes to the top. But Bigsby, given the situation, with the potential of being on the Trevor Lawrence's offense, if he's given that rushing ability to be out there on the field, I go Tank Bigsby. They're second.
It's a difficult one between these guys, but I'm with you. I think that Gibson is the guy that I would prefer only because, number one, the profile's still better. The workload opportunity, the path to it, Brian Robinson, I'm not ultra sold on him. I think he was probably better than we saw considering the state that he entered the league in. But the other thing is the Commanders are on the opposite side of the running back target share. Their rate of running back targets was nearly 23%. So they were targeting running backs at a rate significantly higher than that of Jacksonville. So we're actually hoping that Jacksonville starts doing what the Commanders are already doing. And this is like the secret sauce in the Antonio Gibson profile, is that pass catching, explosive capability. So I think we're in lockstep there. I think it's Antonio Gibson. I think it's close. If Antonio Gibson didn't perform this year, didn't get his opportunity this year, I think then it's clearly going to go to Tank Bigsby because, Gibson will approach 26. Bigsby will still be locked in a position where he's buried, though. So even if there's a slight workload split, I think that in the rookie year, we'll probably see Etienne continue to manage a large part of this workload, and it's going to suppress Bigsby's value. But this is the problem with these guys. If Etienne misses a game, if Bigsby gets opportunity and he shows out, their value, like Tony Pollard, you start to have that, that debate of, is the backup better than the starter?
You have the debate, and then Doug Peterson, historically, we all loved Miles Sanders for a long time, and Jordan Howard ate and a lot of his workload. Boston Scott ate into his workload. So if there's any sort of question in Etienne's ability, I don't think he's not hesitant to go switch to another guy.
Not even at the blink of an eye. I could absolutely see it happening. I mean, they want to win. They want to perform, and that's number one goal. With that being said, third rookie running back in a row, and we are certainly sliding down the scale on Keep Trade Cut as we move to the next one. This player is about 5 or 6 spots lower than Bigsby was. So Bigsby was a value. This guy's even more of a value. And we talked about the team a little bit here in the last sort of dichotomy of players. This is Roschon Johnson of the Chicago Bears. Why is Roschon Johnson one injury away?
Well, I mean, he's dealing with, Khalil Herbert, which they didn't invest a high draft pick in Herbert with the Bears. And they signed not really that big of a deal with Deontay Foreman. But with Roschon, if any injury comes in and they want to just see what they've got in the 4th round pick in Roschon Johnson, I mean, he has a small sample size behind Bijan, but he's 100 percentile according to PFF in missed tackles forced per attempt rate. And granted, it's a small sample size, but my God, at his size, at 6 foot, 220, that's the kind of player that you want to be targeting in an offense with Justin Fields. That's supposed to be going up to the stratosphere right now, going in the preseason, and 96 or 92nd percentile according to PFF yards after contact, and not even including some of the receiving targets that he was receiving in just a small sample size. So he's a big back that's getting targeted, and he's efficient as a runner. I mean, sign me up. And he's got like little to no tread because he's been behind Bijan Robinson his entire career. This is a guy that could absolutely take over this backfield after an injury would happen to any of these guys that would take over Deontay Foreman or Khalil Herbert.
Look, it was a trick question because I actually don't think he needs an injury to take over this backfield. Like, I think he could.
That's true.
It's an injury away. Okay. But with that being said, he could easily take this backfield over effortlessly. Deontay Foreman's got the injury history, played well last year, all things considered, but is signed to a $1.5 million deal. Khalil Herbert will be a career backup. He's not owed anything significant. I think I was looking at his SPO-Track information. He's got like $68,000 in dead money. He's got like paperboy dead money left on him. But with that being said, you look at Roschon Johnson in this backfield and go back to the David Montgomery time. If anybody who's high on Khalil Herbert is looking back at his advanced metrics, and I know he was decent, but just remember this. The only time Khalil Herbert got on the field was when David Montgomery was hurt. And when David Montgomery was healthy, Khalil Herbert was back on the bench. There was only one time where Khalil Herbert had more than 9 carries when David Montgomery was healthy, but Montgomery still had a 70% snap share in that one single game. So he's not a threat at all. And neither of these two running backs are pass catchers. Now, I know people are going to say, well, Roschon Johnson's not a pass catcher. Well, he was behind one of the most prolific running backs in history since Saquon Barkley. Right. But what I will tell you is Roschon Johnson did have a target per route run rate of 15.6%, which was actually higher than Bijan, which was higher than Tank Bigsby. So when he was on the field, he was being targeted at a rate greater than them, while also finishing with a top 40 yards per route run across all running backs in football. And on top of this, as you mentioned, his missed tackle rate was 45%, which was the highest in the country over the last 2 years. And of course, yards created after contact were top 3 in the nation last year at 4.28. So while he's not a burner, he's got a profile like Josh Jacobs, which has, believe it or not, been a pretty winning profile of late.
I'd say so.
Right? I mean, the Alvin Kamara throw you to the ground, break the tackle. People are going to go, shouldn't we be concerned about the Justin Fields rushing floor? My answer is no, you shouldn't be, because when David Montgomery was healthy, there was only 3 games with Justin Fields where he had less than 14 carries. It was over 16 touches per game. So even while playing with Justin Fields, who was averaging 6 rush attempts a game and in some games going much more than that, he was still getting his opportunity. And I know people are fearful, but it's wrought with a lot of disinformation.
Absolutely. And I think if you assume that this offense is going to get better, there's going to be more red zone attempts, and they're more than likely going to be into those read option situations where they either give it to have Fields go or they give it to the running back. And if you got a big back that has the rushing prowess like someone like Roschon Johnson and with not a lot of tread, you get to midseason and these guys are getting hurt. I mean, Foreman and Herbert was out for a significant injury last year. You could totally see Roschon Johnson completely taking over this backfield, especially with, Herbert was efficient, but they invested a 6th-round pick, and it wasn't this GM and coaching regime that invested in the Herbert. So you could easily see that they move on from him and they, put the investment in the 4th-round pick that they got in Roschon.
You know who another moderately athletic 4th-round pick that everybody loves right now is? Dameon Pierce, right? Everybody loves Dameon. Nobody, and coming out of college, like, yes, his profile, his advanced metrics on lesser usage were great, but look at where he's being valued on websites like Keep Trade Cut right now. I believe he's within the top 20 range. Dameon Pierce, RB17, 4th-round guy. And as we mentioned, in the absolute blink of an eye, you can be replaced. I mean, it can happen that quick to these running backs. So I'm not concerned about what the outcome might be for Roschon Johnson in the future. I just believe he's better than all the backs in this backfield. And one injury to Khalil Herbert, who is probably the honorary starter, right? It's like the senior that was on the varsity team that never played. Like, he starts the last game of the season because, well, he held the clipboard all year and he's going to college next year, so you let him play. But Roschon is clearly the dude in this backfield. So the question is, on Keep Trade Cut, he's the RB40 right next to Rashad Penny and right next to Tyler Algier. Of those three, go ahead.
Oh, it's got to go. It's got to go for sure. Roschon Johnson being number one, and then it would be Algier, because I think he's a premium backup to Bijan if Bijan ever goes down, and then and then last would be Rashad Penny, just due to the injury history and age.
There was actually no way to prove whether you got that right or wrong, but I think you got it right.
I think I got it right.
I think you got it right. All
I
right.
think consensus would think I got it right.
Fourth player on this list, not a running back, not a rookie. So we're breaking a trend. Last player on this list that we both really, really like, Lee, Isaiah Likely of the Baltimore Ravens. Tell me why he is one injury away, or I know I'm going to have to sell you on him a little bit overall, but why is he pretty obviously one injury away?
Well, he's one injury away because he's around, the second best tight end in football and Mark Andrews. So, and if Andrews goes down, when he went down, and especially in week 8, he was tight end 2 with fantasy points. And the 3 weeks that Andrews was out, he had a 78% snap share. So, in his rookie year, coming out from Coastal Carolina, college dominator was 91st percentile. Breakout age is 97th percentile. He had a fantastic profile at 6'5", and he was just a monster producer. And the propensity for Lamar Jackson to target his tight end in this, they're still going to use his skill set and run heavy. So I think Likely will be on the field a lot.
Listen, I know I have to sell you on this. I have to sell the audience on this. I'm going to sell everyone on this. Listen, while Mark Andrews has mostly been a staple of health, this is a what-if video, okay? It is a what-if video, but I actually think that Likely has value even without an injury. Hear me out on this. Are you ready?
All right.
Okay. In 2022, Likely was a top 10 tight end every time he saw a snap share over 66%, while also having a top 20 ADOT. He was top 18 in yards per route run, and these next two are very important. Likely was top 12 overall in red zone targets last year with 11 on just 60 targets, and was only pass blocking on 2.7% of his total plays on the field at the position. That was the tight end 41. Dallas Goedert, 3.6%. Travis Kelce, 3.6%. Mark Andrews, lowest in the league, 0.2%. So neither of these guys were really blocking while on the field, which is really impressive because we saw Kyle Pitts at 6%. Guys like Hunter Henry are at 9%. You want a guy running routes, not blocking. That's really important.
Absolutely.
The other thing is, prior to the addition of new OC Todd Monken, Baltimore's tight end target rate was number 1 in the NFL over the last 2 years. 29.1% the year prior, 43.9% last year, but it gets better. Because while coach of the Georgia Bulldogs, Todd Monken ran 2 tight end sets over 62% of the time. The Bulldog quarterbacks targeted the tight end position over 29% of the time, and 1/3 of Georgia's total receiving yards came to the tight end position. Now, I know that they've invested money into Odell Beckham. I know they've invested draft capital into Zay Flowers, a player that we just did a video about not too long ago. But when I consider Todd Monken's words and what he wants to do with these tight ends, and the reason that he continues to heap praise on guys like Likely because of the athleticism and ability to get open and the nature at which they can run these 2 tight end sets with Lamar Jackson, I'm incredibly excited. 1 injury away, absolutely. Without an injury, very possibly. It's likely that he's going to be decent even without an injury. I'm very high on him. And the thing about it is, you look at him on Keep Trade Cut, and we could pull this up because I think what's really interesting, tight end premium formats, obviously he's a guy that is pretty coveted, right? I mean, I don't think in tight end premium formats he's going to be an easy player to sneak off a roster, but I wanted to pull it up real quick. Isaiah Likely is the tight end 18 right now between Luke Musgrave and Dalton Schultz, who we don't know what Dalton Schultz is going to be in his new landing spot. And Mark Andrews has been relatively healthy. I mean, he's missed some time over the past couple of seasons, probably I think 4 or 5 games over the total of 3 years he's been in the league. But you look at Likely, we talked about Chig last week. The question I want to ask you, and it's not on the show sheet, so this is very sniper shot. Between Chig and between Likely, which player do you prefer? Because they are one spot apart in the rankings.
Chig and Likely.
That's Okonkwo for the listeners.
I know. Let's see here. Gosh, between the two, I think I would still go Chig, just because I don't think that he doesn't really have anybody to fight against. And we talked about how potentially that offense could go pass heavy once they move on from Derrick Henry. Likely, he still has to deal with Andrews. He's on contract. I could see your argument. It's the most likely position outside of running back to get. They're going to get hurt, right? A lot. They're getting hit on the middle of the field all the time. So Andrews could get some injuries and stuff, and Likely could be in those two tight end sets. But I'm still going Chig over Likely.
Listen, it's fair because there's not a lot of history short of an Aaron Hernandez, Rob Gronkowski situation where two tight ends thrive at a significant level. Mark Andrews isn't just a good tight end. He's one of the best in the league and has an immense target share. So to your point, if I'm betting on these two players between Chig and Likely and looking at the future, well, Andrews is young enough that he's not going anywhere. He's the de facto number one pass catcher in this offense, no matter what receiver's in it. And Chig is probably the most likely to find himself in a position to be a highly successful tight end, considering the intangibles that we've seen from him and what we saw from him last year. So right again, despite the fact that there was no way to be right or wrong. All right, guys, thank you for checking out the video. We've got a lot of other content that we've got queued up that we're going to start producing over the next couple weeks. We're heading to the Fantasy Football Expo here in the next couple days, so I'm sure we'll report back on that. I'm sure we're going to have some video content based around that as well. Guys, if there's a player that we didn't mention that you think is one injury away that we should have mentioned, comment below. Of course, hit like, subscribe, and then, guys, we'll be back again next week with more content. And also, while I'm rambling on, dynastyrankings.com. Go check it up. Sign up for the email. Alexander and I are getting close. Hopefully, we'll have some information for you when we get back from the Fantasy Football Expo. Drop some, hopefully very validating information on you of what's to come next with some definitive. So stay tuned for that. We will see you guys next week.